that charity begins at home, and that means stopping sending of humans to space. Let's ask first of all what space is. We're going to define it as the region that exists outside the Earth's atmosphere, typically anything that exists beyond 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Sending humans into space refers to a particular type of space mission. We're not talking about all kinds of space projects, we're talking only about manned missions with a human crew on board. What is the model we suggest for this debate? We're going to suggest a global ban on all forms of manned spaceflight. This should be applied across all countries with a manned space program, including the United States, Russia, China, and India. This global ban is also going to apply to private organizations like Richard Branson's Virgin Flights, for example, which desire to send you up just slightly above the Earth's atmosphere for spaceflight. But we still stand for the following things: the sending of weather satellites, global positioning satellites, and telecommunication satellites up into space using multi-stage rockets which don't involve a human crew. Today, we're going to prove 3 lines of analysis. First, I'm going to explain why sending humans to space incurs unjustified opportunity costs for the world. I'm next going to demonstrate that it jeopardizes the global space project. Lastly, my second speaker is going to argue that it compromises relations between countries. So let's look first at why it incurs unjustified opportunity costs for the world. Our thesis is that manned space flights sacrifice far too much money without sufficient global social benefit in return. Now, we think that manned spaceflight is dangerously costly and brings minuscule benefits, if any. Why is this the case? Space exploration is already very expensive. According to the New York Times Almanac, for example, it costs up to $4,000 just to send 1 kilogram of material up into space. But it's especially costly when we send humans into space because of the extreme conditions that a space environment necessitates that we need to shield humans against. For instance, let's look at the heat shields required for the American Space Shuttle to send humans into space. Just for a single heat shield tile, the size of a slice of cheese, that's going to cost $5,000 because of the need to use very special, hyperporous ceramic material. Let's also look at the huge gravitational force dampeners that are attached to the shuttle so that humans can fly into space safely without getting conked out along the way. That's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. That's why every time we just send the space shuttle up, that costs us almost $1 billion. Manned spaceflight incurs such gargantuan expenses, but the benefits are not commensurate. Why? Because, for instance, when we're looking at astronomical observations, hold on a moment, sir, all of these can be done on Earth. There are no significant space technologies that have been developed as a consequence of manned spaceflight, and in fact, zero-gravity conditions are already simulated in laboratories like that at Lawrence Livermore in the United States, on Earth already. Yes, sir?
Since space exploration is very expensive, but according to statistics by NASA, every space exploration, space shuttle adds 8.2% to the US economy.
Sir, we're not quite sure how it adds to the US economy. We need you to explain to us what that benefit exactly is in your next speaker. But even if it seems to generate some kinds of benefits, we're going to argue that the costs far outweigh any of the benefits you're talking about to the gross domestic product, as I'll show you now. We're looking today at manned spaceflight not only in the context of the program itself, but in the context of countries which are suffering severely from loads of socioeconomic problems and yet still possessing manned spaceflight programs. We look at a world where 2 billion people continue to live below $2 a day. We're looking at countries, even like the United States, which are suffering 9.4% unemployment rates at the moment and are struggling to cope with a massive debt burden that is the size of $14.6 trillion. Even in India and China, which are called emerging economies, 700 million people are still impoverished in India, and 300 million people in Western China are still mired in poverty. Given current conditions, we think it's much better for countries with manned spaceflight programs, to divert money away from this to solving the pressing social problems they have at hand. For instance, The National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the United States now has $18.5 billion US as a budget devoted to manned spaceflight. If this money could be channeled instead to funding social welfare programs or even supporting international development, that would add a huge boost to the rest of the world. For instance, it's estimated by the United Nations that it only requires $15 billion US to set up, no thank you, to set up universal primary education programs across the world. That's actually less than what NASA requires for manned spaceflight in just a year. Since manned spaceflights incur huge costs with little benefit and the money could be spent better elsewhere, there's a huge opportunity cost we've got to eliminate, and thus we've got to stop sending humans into space. So let's now look at why it jeopardizes the global space project. Here, the thrust of our argument is that manned spaceflight stalls the development and effectiveness of space activities as a whole. Why? Because now manned spaceflight programs suck away huge amounts of scientific talent and capital. Worldwide, 75% of space-related funding is currently channeled to manned spaceflight. Manned spaceflight, hold on a moment, man, takes up most of the top Ivy League graduates in physics, in astronomical science. And we think all the talent could be better devoted to developing better space technologies which benefit us on Earth. Wouldn't you agree?
No. What is the financial difference between manned space project and other telecommunication satellites that we send out to space? What is the financial difference?
The financial difference is huge, and that's precisely what I'm going to show now. When we send up a single satellite, that only costs tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. When we send up a single space shuttle mission with a human crew on board, that's $1 billion. That's the financial difference we're talking about here. But moving back to my argument, we think it's bad for us to send humans to space because it hurts the effectiveness of loads of other space projects which don't involve sending humans up. First of all, as I explained just now, the scientific talent which now goes to manned spaceflight could be better allocated to developing better communication satellites, better global positioning satellites, for example, which allow us to deal with pressing problems today, such as developing mobile phone telephony in developing countries, which means direct benefits to the world today. We've seen a reflection in this, in the fact that America decided to stop its space shuttle mission program altogether. But in second place, sending humans into space releases enormous amounts of space debris because of the huge vessel that you've got to send up to accommodate human beings, as well as the plastic cartons from food and drink and the parts of the spacesuit they leave in space because they can't recycle it. Such things are really bad because space debris that ends up circling around Earth damages satellites. Debris just the size of a golf ball is good enough to knock out a satellite that's traveling at 2 miles every second, and it's even worse with large debris. Contrastingly, if we stop manned spaceflight, we reduce the amount of space debris, we reduce the amount of scientific talent that's wasted, and we can go to developing better communications technologies. Because we've demonstrated that we save the world and we save the space project, it is side proposition, you go.
The first proposition speaking for his speech, and now to open the case for the opposition, I call upon Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to Zig Ziglar, we should not let our fears prevent us from pursuing our goals. My name is Ezeme Kingsley, standing here to strongly oppose the motion. This House will ban sending humans to space. Now, we on the team opposition are saying that this House, that the world should continue sending humans to space because they are the only people that can give us the true experience of space exploration. And we are going to buttress our stand under 2 generic themes. Well, I'm going to be telling you mostly about the consequences of not sending humans to space because of so many things it will lead to the neglect of. My second speaker is going to be telling you what sending humans to space will bring the knowledge sending humans to space, will bring to the world in future, and its benefits, mostly on its future benefits to the world, if we continue funding this space exploration by men. While my test speaker will reaffirm and stand, and of course do the rebuttals.
Point, sir.
No, thank you, sir. Team proposition told us that space exploration is very costly. Yes, we agree to that. But what we, the team opposition, are saying, that the end products gotten from space exploration by men can be used to supplement for the losses incurred. For instance, they told us to prove how the United States of America benefits from this. But the United States of America taps fuel from space exploration, and that adds 8.2% to their economy, according to NASA researches. This is just to show us that space exploration, aside from giving man the fundamental knowledge man needs to survive on Earth, adds to our economy, and we cannot. And the argument that we should stop men from astronomy just because some people are starving cannot stand. They also told us
Point, sir.
that, no thank you, that space exploration takes a lot of talent. But ladies and gentlemen, we all know that some people have the potential to excel in space exploration, saying that it takes, no thank you, sir. Space exploration will take a lot of talent as it requires to further. And that is why the team proposition is saying that if more people will read for astronomy and go to space exploration, since it's their talent and they can excel well there, they should go to space exploration and not go into other studies, other fields, which they can't even do well if they are told to manage those fields. And so if more people have more talent to excel in space exploration, that is why we are saying that they should excel in space exploration and not go into other subjects, other fields, simply because they think it's costly.
If a $700 billion stimulus program couldn't even cause the US economy to grow, how does a single space flight add 8.2% to the US economy?
Thank you for the question. Yes, like we said before, we know that space exploration is expensive. But ladies and gentlemen, the importance of space exploration by man cannot be overemphasized. Because aside the discoveries it helps man to gain, it also adds 8.2% to the economy because of the fuels gotten and other chemicals tapped in the atmosphere. The US government can now comfortably conduct nuclear fusion in space, saving them more costs. This is just to show us, ladies and gentlemen, no thank you, sir, that space exploration is essential. We should not only talk about the financial involvement, we should talk about the true essence of life space exploration gives man. Because through space exploration, man has gotten the true essence of life. Mostly everything we know about our world today is because of space exploration. So in cases such as this, we should not only put into consideration the economic status, we should also put into consideration other fields that space exploration will help man to excel. So I thought you heard with my point. The house should continue sending man into space, ladies and gentlemen, because human beings can give us better account of our environment and solar system. Ladies and gentlemen, the Apollo 8 mission, which is the circumnavigation of the Earth, helped us to discover that the Earth is spherical in space, in shape. Also, it was through space exploration that we discovered about the Earth and 9 planets. What the team opposition is saying is that it's through space exploration, and that if men are allowed to explore space, they will give us better account of man and his environment. It was space exploration that made us know that the Earth... No, sir. It was space exploration that gave us answer to fundamental questions like, are we alone? Are there other forms of life on Earth? Are we the only people existing on Earth? It was space exploration that gave us the knowledge of the fact that we have the rotation of the Earth, which brings about day and night. It was space exploration that gave us the knowledge about the fact, about the revolution of the Earth, which brings about a year. In cases such as this, we should not only put into consideration the economic benefits of this space exploration by men, we should also put into consideration other aspects that will benefit man and his environment. And that is why we are saying that it is not a waste of fun, because the end products and the knowledge gotten by man, exploring this space, can help the world a lot to advance further. No question.
So, the money spent on space, sending man into space, could save thousands of lives a year. Why is the knowledge you suggest worth more than these people's lives?
But the team opposition does not think we should abandon astronomy simply because some people are starving. We should not abandon that sector of the economy because it is essential for the growth of man and survival of man on Earth. So many governments today embark on different projects. You won't tell us that every government that suffers from poverty, starvation today, is because they are exploring space. And that is why we are saying that these different governments should find a possible method of attending to their economy and not telling us that we should abandon astronomy, which truly gives man the true essence of life. In addition, it will render many people unemployed if we should stop sending man to space. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the National Aeronautic and Space Engineering, which exists in the United States of America, has over 300,000 employees. The same is similar to Russia, China, all those who embark on this space exploration. Now we should stop man by exploring space and using things like rockets, satellites. Then, ladies and gentlemen, many people will be rendered unemployed. We all know that in so many schools today, they talk about courses like this space exploration will take different courses, different talents to sectors such as talents to sectors such as nuclear chemistry, nuclear physics, and will let them to abandon other sectors of the economy. But ladies and gentlemen, if we stop sending money to space, that will render so many people unemployed. Because these people that are working in this space earn a living from it. So, even lecturers that teach those courses in the university are paid. And when we stop funding this and stop sending money to space, that means those people will be rendered unemployment because they will no longer see the relevance of studying these courses in the universities. And that is why we are saying that we should continue sending man to space in order not to render so many people homeless and unemployed. And in conclusion, it will lead to neglect of so many important areas of academic endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, the Apollo 8 mission aspires so many children to go and study in the university to become aeronautic engineers, rocket engineers, to mention but a few. If we stop sending money into space, it will lead to the abandonment and neglect of astronomy. Courses like nuclear physics, nuclear chemistry, we now have to suffer simply because the people no longer see the essence of studying those courses in the university. And that is why we are saying that we should not abandon it. Science is based on trial and error. And if we base on the disadvantages and forget the enormous advantages of sending man into space, ladies and gentlemen, the whole world will put into space. So having told you that we should continue sending man into space because of the consequences that we are bound to face if we stop this sending man into space by telling you that it will render people unemployed, it will give people better knowledge of his environment and solar system, to mention but a few. We please beg you to join in opposition. Thank you.
Thank the first opposition speaker for his speech. I'd like to continue the case of the proposition I call upon Ashish.
Like most debaters, I am a bit of a nerd. But unlike most debaters, I like to think of myself as a bit of a romantic. So when anyone in the room tries to talk to me about astronomy, I do admit I get a bit misty-eyed. But I still know that I live on planet Earth, and that this is my home and where all the other fellow human beings I care for are going to suffer. Because our home, Earth, has problems of its own. I have one simple point of contention. What are the benefits of space exploration? Because on their side of the house, they conceded the massive costs that Ben talked about. But before I move on to this point of contention, I'd like to point out that a lot of Ben's analysis, in fact his entire second point of substantive, about why we should devote this scientific capital to more efficient and productive forms of space exploration went untouched. His point about why manned space exploration creates very damaging space debris has also gone untouched, and we'd like to hear a response to what we think are these very important points in this debate. So what then are the benefits? The first benefits Team Nigeria talked to us about were the economic benefits. They said that NASA contributed to 8.2% of the US's GDP growth. We tell you, that's simply not true. If $700 billion could barely do anything, we would like to question what one relatively small institution, which happens to be very wealthy, can do for the whole of the US economy. Why is this so? Because NASA is in fact a very closed community. The money which we disperse to NASA doesn't function and flow into the rest of the economy like we do when we spend it on infrastructure, for instance, which we think is a much better form of investment and stimulus for the economy. Why is this so? It's because the money that we put into NASA goes into creating objects that are never used for any other purpose than for being sent into space, to carry humans into space, and then to come back again. But if the US spend this money building roads, or schools, or hospitals, not only does this money flow into the economy, the actual results benefit people. So even if you want to say that this benefit accrued, we'd say there are much more efficient ways of creating this benefit in the first place. Then you talk to us about employment. We tell you the sort of people who are employed at NASA, firstly, can be shifted to other areas within NASA, which focus on, let's say, developing better GPS technology, satellite which can project telephone signals over a much larger area and penetrate concrete, for instance. The fact that telecommunications technology today is at pretty much the same level it was, no thank you ma'am, in the 1970s is very telling. We think NASA can take this manpower and use it in other areas where people's talents can be used. In any case, even if NASA did not do this, the sort of people who work on manned space flights are extremely talented and bright. I'll take you in a moment, ma'am. Many other state departments, in fact many other scientific institutions, will be happy to take these people in anyway. Employment is just not the problem. Yes?
If space exploration can do such, like bring in such amount of money into the US economy, don't you know that when we continue focusing on space exploration, it will still do more?
I've just demonstrated why it's inefficient, and I've also questioned that fact that that number is probably not very true. So we don't think that point of information really addresses any of the concerns that we have raised. Let me move back to my rebuttals. They secondly talked to us about the gains in terms of knowledge. They talked about how we're able to observe the environment using manned space flights. That's not true. All the information we have about the environment come from unmanned space satellites that are just floating in space, doing exactly what they're supposed to do, pointing at the Earth, allowing us to predict hurricanes, to locate oil fields. There's no need to send men up into space, no thank you, to have that sort of information. Then he talked about how we need to encourage people to study astrophysics and how we're wasting the talent developed in these areas. That's not true. There are many other areas of astrophysics which are very important. I've just talked about the different kinds of satellites we can and should invest in. We are not wasting that field of study, no thank you, nor are we wasting the manpower who goes to study these sorts of subjects. Then he talked to us about the strange fact that perhaps we discovered that the world was round from satellites in space, and the fact that the US has conducted experiments in nuclear fission in space. Unfortunately, both of these just aren't true. The ancient Greeks and Egyptians knew that the Earth was round from observing the way it went around the sun and from mathematical calculations. Nuclear fission has never been carried out in space because of the massive political costs. I'll be elaborating on that just a little later on in my substantive. But let's move on then to the last layer of analysis they gave us, that of aspirational goals. We acknowledge that humans have aspirational goals. But aspirational goals come when we've ensured that people have good lives, are employed, and have some decent, basic level of dignity in their daily lives. People do not have this in the present, and we are very proud to prioritize these basic needs over aspirational goals. Besides, we tell you that these often create many, many different problems. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about now in my point of substantive, about why their policy compromises the relations between countries. Let us first recognize that the legal status of space in the present is currently extremely uncertain. The only international agreement that we have which relates to outer space is the Outer Space Treaty signed in 1967 between major developed economies at that time. The problem with this agreement is that it is extremely vague and extremely weak. In its opening, it says that space is not a domain for any national sovereign entity. But it later goes on to make the strange claim that it may be used by sovereign nations for their own exclusive purposes. And there is an incentive for nations to want to claim space, because many nations still want to weaponize it. It started with Ronald Reagan in the Cold War, with what he called the Strategic Defense Initiative, no thank you ma'am, or Star Wars. Basically, create a space-based missile shield for the whole of the US. And even though the Cold War has ended, many developed nations still want to pursue this goal. All of the P5 economies have commissions which have at one point or another investigated the probability of having space-based defense systems, not just the United States. Why is this very dangerous when it comes, therefore, to manned space flight? Because it is seen as an important precursor, because it is a piece of political theatre that countries use to cement their quasi-sovereign claims to large areas of space. Why is this so? Why is manned space flight so special, and why does it create these sorts of tensions? Firstly, it's used as a statement of technological dominance. It's happened through the Cold War because of the space race, and it still happens today. Because of the fact that you're able to say we spend so much money sending one man to space, the fact that we can afford to waste $5 billion sending one man to space says a lot about the power of our economy. That's the first reason it's a good piece of political theatre. Secondly, it's incredibly grandiose. The sort of media hype that surrounds such events is incredibly large and is broadcasted to people around the world. But thirdly, it's because these missions are manned. Because the fact that you place one of your own people on that spaceship and send them out to space is seen as a representation of your own nation's ideals. That person was born and bred on your own land. He carries into space the flag of your nation. But the problem is that such actions cause lots of diplomatic conflict. When China in 2008 sent its first man into space, when it sent Yang Liwei into space in 2008, 2 weeks after that, the US convened a session in the Senate where it discussed the possibility of creating more advanced missile systems to defend against space-based attacks. And one of the reasons there was a chill in the relationships between the US and China in 2009 was because when the US requested China tell it where it got its model for spaceflight for manned space missions came from, China refused to tell it. Because of the fact that countries have interests bound up in these diplomatic assertions and in their assertions of quasi-sovereign claims to space, they inevitably enter conflict which have to do with manned space missions. We want to sidestep this and let countries cooperate on things which really matter, like helping the third world, like giving countries the diplomatic finesse they need to carry out missions in more humanitarian regions in the world and with more humanitarian issues. What have I shown you? We protect lives and we protect relations between countries. We are very proud to stand in here in proposition.
Speakers for a speech, and now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, what Team Proposition is telling you today is that you and I are incapable of exploring beyond our own world. What they are telling us, what they are here today, is to instill fear into us and tell us that we're incompetent of handling jobs ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, they are here to shatter the dreams of young children who want to become astronauts. Ladies and gentlemen, but what Team Opposition is here to tell you today is that there is nothing beyond your capability, that there is nothing that we cannot achieve, and that is only you and I that are capable, fit, and competent, are the major persons that should explore in our world, and beyond our world, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is based on this that we still believe that we should continue sending human beings into space. But before I forge ahead into I am going to be speaking on 3 major points. I'm going to tell you how sending human beings into space will help eliminate the Earth's current overpopulation, will help reduce the Earth's current overpopulation.
Point of information.
No, thank you. And that it is only human beings that can handle space affairs properly. I'm also going to tell you that it is only human beings that can make reasonable discoveries. But before I put ahead, I would like to look at some of the arguments that was given to us by Team Proposition. Team Proposition told us that all discoveries that were made about the solar system were not made by that they were all made by non-manned space programs, ladies and gentlemen. But Team Opposition does not agree with that, because recent information shows that students in California discovered a cave in Mars. Ladies and gentlemen, this was not done by telecommunication satellites. It was not done by rockets. It was done by human beings. No, thank you. And this is to tell you that all discoveries that were made on space was not actually made by non-Mars space programs. Ladies and gentlemen, they equally told us that if we should continue sending human beings into space, that it would lead some countries into monopolizing it, such as the United States of America. But ladies and
Point of
gentlemen,
information,
no,
ma'am.
thank you. We should understand that the world is now a global village. And some countries, we all believe, are financially stable more than the others. And if any country has financial capacity to fund this space exploration, which involves men, why shouldn't they be allowed to do it? Ladies and gentlemen, this is for the benefit of everybody. And that is why we strongly believe that we should continue sending human beings into space.
Point
Well,
of
thank
information.
you. They only told us about they told us about some countries that they are not economically financial, that do not have the financial capacity to fund it, that they have overall problems such as infrastructures, health, and that we should channel our money and resources into funding this. But ladies and gentlemen, we already told you the huge benefit that we stand to gain if we continue funding space exploration, and they are equally supporting manned space exploration, and they are equally supporting that we should send telecommunication satellites and rockets. And we also believe that this involves a huge financial commitment. So I would like Team Proposition to come and clarify us on that point. So with this, I go here with my main argument. We should continue sending humans into space because it will help reduce Earth's current overpopulation. Ladies and gentlemen, recent statistics show that Earth's current population is 6.8 billion people, and this has been noted to be beyond the Earth's carrying capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to continue spending, no thank you, human beings into space because it will help to reduce this Earth's current overpopulation. Because when people go into space, ladies and gentlemen, because it's only human beings that can discover how the weather condition outside space is, whether it's fit enough for people to live in. It was human beings that discovered that there is possible life in Mars. They were the ones that discovered that there is water in Mars. They equally discovered that there is salt in Mars, which is similar to the salt that we use here on Earth. Ladies and
Point of
gentlemen.
information.
No, thank you. And this is to tell us that it is only human beings that can know whether outside space is fit enough for us to dwell in. And we are saying that the Earth is overpopulated. And what will happen when the Earth becomes too small for us? I'll take it next second. When the Earth becomes too small for all of us to dwell in, are we to start killing people? Are we to use the zero tolerance in China, where everybody kills, where they kill even someone that just commits just a little crime, like stealing, ladies and gentlemen? We are not to resort to killing people, ladies and gentlemen. Other means of controlling population of the Earth have failed, such as the use of contraceptive, condoms, family planning, ladies and gentlemen. Every day, the Earth's population keeps increasing day by day. And where are we going to send all these people when the Earth becomes too small for us to dwell in, ladies and gentlemen? And that is why we should continue sending human beings on space, because they are the only ones that can find out whether we can actually live in space. Your question.
Madam, I propose to you that no country on earth currently has the resources to send the billions of people you are suggesting into space.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we continue funding space exploration, we should understand that space exploration is a gradual process. It's not something that we just do overnight, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we should continue spending human beings into space, because they have gradually made some discoveries outside space, just like we told you that they've discovered possible life in Mars. And if we should continue encouraging human beings and sending them into space, they will make greater discoveries. And that is what Team Opposition is agitating for. We should continue spending human beings into space, because they will enable us. They are the only ones competent enough to make reasonable discoveries. And that leads me to my next point, ladies and gentlemen, that it is only human beings that can make reasonable discoveries outside space. Ladies and gentlemen, just like we told you that students in California, that they discovered a cave in planet Mars, ladies and gentlemen. This was not done by telecommunication satellites. Neither was it done by rockets, ladies and gentlemen. It was done by humans. And that is why we have to send human beings into space. Because they are the only ones competent enough, no thank you, to make these discoveries. We also told you that they found salt and water in Mars. And the salt that was found in Mars was discovered to be like that, similar to the Earth. No, thank you. And this is to tell you that there are abundant resources outside space, which can only be discovered by human beings, and not telecommunication satellites, and not rockets. Then the final issue I would like to go into, ladies and gentlemen, is that it is only human beings that can handle space affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, a space lab has been built in space. No, thank you. And this was not done by telecommunication satellite, neither was it done by rockets. And the size is like that of a football. a football court, ladies and gentlemen. And scientists now take cancer samples into space to know whether the low gravitational force will help cure this cancer, ladies and gentlemen. People, by sending human beings into space, has enabled us to make new discoveries and is encouraging new discoveries. And when we continue to spend them outside space, they will make greater discoveries. But the fact that they were able to build a space lab outside the space that is like the size of a football court, this is to tell you that there is no limit to what they can achieve. That they can achieve greater heights if we should continue sending human beings into space. Because we certainly believe that rockets cannot do this, neither can telecommunication sites do this. So with those points that we have listed so far, we strongly believe that we should join team opposition in saying that we should continue sending human beings into space. And we'll be able to prove this to you beyond every reasonable doubt, because we told you that if we continue sending human beings into space, it will help reduce the Earth overpopulation. We told you that the current Earth overpopulation is 6.8 billion people, and it is beyond the Earth's carrying capacity. And when we continue sending human beings into space, they will make more discoveries outside space, which will enable us to move all these people outside space when the world becomes too small for us to dwell in. We probably told you that it is only human beings that can make or can handle space affairs. We gave the example of the space lab that was built outside space, which was built by human beings. This cannot be done by rockets, ladies and gentlemen. Probably told you that it is only human beings that can make reasonable discoveries. All discoveries that were made were by human beings and not any other thing. And with all these reasons, we urge you to join team opposition. Thank you.
I thank the second opposition speaker for the speech. I'd like to continue the case of the proposition I called for the team.
I'm going to look at this debate in three areas. First, I'm going to tell you that there are no economic benefits from sending humans to space. Next, I'm going to tell you there are no scientific benefits from sending humans to space. And finally, I'm going to suggest that people, human lives, are more important than ideals. So let's look at my first point of contention, why there are no economic benefits from sending human beings to space. Once again, I'd like to point out that Team Nigeria has so far failed to rebut my first speaker's points on the massive opportunity cost and expense of sending human beings into space, and the amount of lives that could be saved if we channel the money we are spending on human spaceflight into other forms of welfare programs. But I'd like to take the opportunity now to rebut some of the material brought to us by the second proposition speaker. She basically told us this, that firstly, that the world is currently a global village, which suggests that all nations have the financial stability to send people into space. We don't think this is true on side proposition, I apologize. First of all, we think the vast majority of countries around the world still exist as developing economies and clearly do not have the resources to send people into space. The interconnectivity of the world has also created great inequalities in our world, and we suggest the money you're spending on human spaceflight could better be put to ironing out, no thank you madam, these inequalities. Furthermore, as we said in our first speaker already, many of the most developed nations around the world are cancelling their human spaceflight programs because of the sheer amount of cost it is doing to their nations. We give you the example of the United States and of Russia. So we tell you this point is simply not true. She then proposed this strange idea that the world is currently hitting its carrying capacity, and the only way to solve that is to send people into space. First of all, we like to suggest that there are simpler ways to solve the problems of the Earth carrying capacity. First of all, it's very simple. Increase that carrying capacity. We've done this one before with the Green Revolution, when we thought there was going to be a massive famine on Earth, but instead we invested our time and energy into creating green technologies that improved crop yields and ended up feeding hundreds of millions, if not billions, of extra mouths. We tell you the same thing can be done again without resorting to human spaceflight. The next way we suggest of reducing the problem of carrying capacity of Earth is simply family planning and education. Contrary to what she suggested, we think that family planning, education, and most importantly, if you wait a while, sir, economic development does wonders to reduce family sizes and birth rates in countries around the world. In Indonesia, for example, if you wait a while, madam, I'll be taking you. In Indonesia, for example, the average birth rate over the past 10 years has fallen from 5 children per woman to 2.1. We think this is an example of the sort of change that can be done if we take the money, channel the human spaceflight, and spend it on better causes. Yes?
Family planning.
If billions of people were fed through space green revolution, does it reduce the Earth population or increase it?
No, it doesn't reduce the Earth population, but it allows us to take care of a larger population with the same amount of resources, which is why the Earth's effective carrying capacity is increased, preventing the problems that you were speaking about, rather your second speaker was speaking about in her speech. Let's go back to our point. Furthermore, we suggest even if you wanted to send people into space, you don't necessarily need human beings in space in order to, justify whether it's possible to build something to build a colony on a planet such as Mars. I'll be talking about this right now when I tell you why there are no scientific benefits from sending people into space. Why? If you listen very carefully to the sort of things the second speaker was suggesting, she came out and told us that human beings had managed to observe the existence of salt on Mars or caves on Mars. I'd like to point out right now that there has not actually been a manned mission to Mars yet. All the sort of scientific discoveries she was talking about were made by rovers we send there from Earth or observation from telescopes placed on Earth. So we tell you this example precisely proves what my team has been talking about all along today. That we don't actually need actual human beings in space to check and discover new things about space. We can use equipment based on Earth or unmanned probes. Yes, we are still going to need human beings to interpret the data, but they can do this from the safety of a lab on Earth or the California classroom that the second speaker was talking about. We don't need to send human beings, scientists, and school children into space in order to learn about the scientific knowledge that waits out there in the great beyond. The next argument she raised was some example of the International Space Station, or a so-called space lab the size of a football field that human beings had managed to build in space. We on Team on Proposition would like to suggest that the International Space Station is largely useless. We don't think the International Space Station has done any useful experiments for the benefit of mankind. She said that they sent cancer patients into space to see whether they could survive better in zero-gravity environments. On side proposition, we think that is rather unlikely because the constitution of cancer patients means they probably wouldn't be able to make the rigorous trips into space. I mean, after all, guys, we know that astronauts have to spend years, if not months, training themselves to just survive and be okay after that massive, rigorous space flight. We don't think cancer patients were likely to have made that trip at all. In fact, the International Space Station, if you wait a while, madam, is going to shut down in 2016, precisely because countries recognize it hasn't contributed anything to the overall scientific knowledge or economic benefit of humanity. Yes, ma'am?
We didn't say that cancer patients are taken to space. We said that cancer samples, and don't you think that will contribute majorly in the health of the peoples of the world?
We don't think you can take cancer samples into space and then see what happens there, because cancer samples must be attached to living creatures in order for you to see how they grow. And so if you can't take cancer patients into space, then you couldn't take cancer samples into space. I think that point still stands. No, thank you, madam. So we think there is absolutely no scientific benefit to human spaceflight, and we are adamant that the way forward is to ban it. So let's go on to my final, most important point of contention on why people are more important than ideas. Because I put to you right now, even if we considered everything that's come before us, and did admit that there's some sort of aspirational value to human spaceflight, we still need to weigh this against the massive opportunity cost of human spaceflight that has been considered down the line by Team Nigeria. We tell you that yes, knowing whether there are aliens out there might be important. Knowing whether we can build a base on Mars might be important. But the ultimate aim of this is to benefit humanity. And what benefits humanity more? Knowing that these examples exist, knowing that these ideas exist, that such things are possible, or actually having people on this earth to think about these ideas, to hear these ideas, and be inspired by them. If Team Nigeria suggests the main purpose of human spaceflight is to benefit humanity, then we tell you, yes, benefit humanity first. You're destroying your own end goal by supporting human spaceflight because benefiting humanity is far more important than learning about these ideas. If there aren't people down there to listen to these ideas and be inspired by them, there is no point in learning about the sort of knowledge they have suggested. Then the final question that came from their side of the house was this: why then do we propose sending telecommunication satellites, global positioning satellites, and weather satellites into space? It's for a very simple reason. We think these satellites have a hugely important benefits to the global economy. Global positioning satellites, help trucks move around to the areas where their goods are needed most, enable us to send airplanes over long distances without getting lost. Telecommunication satellite has made the sort of financial stability in the global village they were talking about possible in the first place. We believe that any form of space exploration should be subservient to this Earth. Telecommunication satellites, global positioning satellites, and weather satellites benefit this Earth. Sending humans into space does not. So because we've shown you, firstly, there is no economic benefit from sending people into space, that there is no scientific benefit from sending people into space, that most importantly, people are far more important than ideas, go with Team Proposition.
I thank the third proposition speaker for his speech, and now to continue the case to the opposition, I call upon Okwona.
Thank you very much. There is really something both teams have come to agree with in this debate today, which is that space research is important. Although we on team opposition think that it's only when that it will be more enhanced when man is put into space, the team proposition say that it's only when space searchers and unmanned space articles are sent into space. But definitely, ladies and gentlemen, if they agree with just the one fact that space research is important enough as to not totally ignore it, as to at least send unmanned space shuttles into space, then definitely we think is enough reason to make sure that that which the unmanned space shuttles go into space to get will be properly achieved by men when they are put into the space shuttles. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do today is to really do the function which my first speaker assigned to me, which is to really reaffirm our stand and to reward the points made by team proposition. And I'm going to be doing that by properly countering the clashes that have come out in the course of this argument, the bonds of truth, which team proposition do not agree with us and which we believe is properly right. Thank you. The first issue, ladies and gentlemen, is the problem of unjustified opportunity cost. The team proposition kept on saying that space research has unjustified opportunity cost. That when we send people into space, it has no benefit whatsoever.
Point of information.
No, thank you. And I'm now properly going to counter that information. Ladies and gentlemen, what is more important than knowledge? We all know that knowledge is power. If we say that illiteracy is better, then let us try ignorance. Ladies and gentlemen, for the one fact that when people go into space, they gain a whole lot of knowledge. That is one more reason. That is one major
Point of
reason
information, ma'am.
why space research should not be ignored. Why it is more important that man should be put into space research. Because, ladies and gentlemen, like my first speaker rightly said, a whole lot of knowledge is gotten from space research. Due to space research, whether it was unmanned or manned, we got to know about circumnavigation, we got to know about revolution, rotation, and all the likes, ladies and gentlemen. The team proposition claims that these are things we are gotten by unmanned space articles or shuttles. Then we are asking, if unmanned space articles and shuttles could get that, then definitely, when man is put, no thank you, it will get more, it will yield more benefit and make us know all this knowledge. Because, ladies and gentlemen, despite the fact that it seems that all this knowledge we are getting from space research has no impact whatsoever on mankind, a day is coming. I repeat, a day is coming when all this knowledge will really be sought. Because definitely, no knowledge is a waste. We
Point
all
of
know
information.
that the world is going through a whole rate of climatic change. which have the problem of depletion of the ozone layer and all the rest. If we really ignore astronomy, if we ignore space research, if we do not find better ways of making space research more enhanced by making sure that man is put in the paradigm, then ladies and gentlemen, we are not ever going to solve these problems that are facing us because of the ignorance.
Point
So
of
we really
information,
do
ma'am?
thank you that is enough opportunity cost for us to focus on space research. And then the team proposition kept on saying that what of other that when we enhance space research that way by allowing humans to go into space, that then it will economically affect the world. And now that leads me into the second clash of truth, which is
Madam.
the present social problems of the people of the world. This proposition claimed that we on side opposition are typically avoiding and neglecting other priorities that man face. And I'm standing here to say, ladies and gentlemen, that we do not in any way ignore the priorities of man. That we say, ladies and gentlemen, that space research should be enhanced does not mean we say that even countries that cannot afford it should go into it. I know that when my first speaker and second speaker were speaking,
Points of
I'll take in a
information.
second, they rightly emphasized countries such as US and Russia, stating clearly that it's only countries that can afford this space research that can go into it. Because definitely, no country in his right sense of mind will leave other things that are more important for space research. But these countries such as US and Russia, you will all agree with me, are very well developed. So we should not stop them from going into space research simply because we think others can't afford it. Others can't afford it, they're taking care of their other problems. But these countries that can afford it definitely should go into space research. Or don't you think so?
Ferdinand Magellan discovered the world was spherical through a maritime voyage. We can make astronomical observations about the sun from Earth. Explain to us, madam, why we still need manned space exploration.
Thank you very much. But thank you for saying rightly that it was a man who discovered this through whatever medium you use, ladies and gentlemen. If a man can do that even while on Earth, then definitely when he goes into space, more ideas are going to come. And I think I've probably answered that question. As I was saying, ladies and gentlemen, we also realize, we see the priorities, we see the basic necessities of others, which is why we encourage the countries that are able, that have the funds and resources to properly fund this, to go into it. And I think this has really countered the question Team Proposition asked us by saying that what of those countries that will not be able to have enough funds to take their countries into space when we mention space cases of reducing population. It is also worthy to mention that the Team Proposition are not following us in the growth and line of our arguments. When my first supporting speaker brought up the case of an international, of a space field in the space in which has the size of a football court, in which cancer samples have been taken to be properly examined to find a cure to cancer. A Team Proposition came up with the argument that human beings who have cancer can never be taken to space. But definitely,
Point of
ladies and
information,
gentlemen,
ma'am?
no thank you. We never mentioned that human beings who have cancer should go into space. What we said was cancer samples should be taken. And when we now clarified them on the case of cancer samples, they now came up with the other argument that cancer samples can never be taken to a space unless it is attached to a living creature. And we now saying
Point of
that
information,
even
ma'am?
dogs can't go into space when we know it will be beneficial to mankind. Definitely not, ladies and gentlemen. Besides, cancer samples, I'm here to tell them, can really be taken into space. It can be taken into space and cultured and grown, and that way we can find the cure to the cancer. Cancer, as we all know, is a major problem that is posing a great challenge to the world
Madam.
today. If that problem can be countered through space research, and if it is the more reason why man should be in the space, then definitely humans should not be stopped from going into space, because we really think about the priorities of others. No, thank you. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, on the case of communication and population, when we say that people should be allowed to go into space, they came up with their own sort of argument that I'll take in a second, other methods can be used. But definitely, ladies and gentlemen, since the world originated, all these methods were put into place. We've been doing family planning, China has been doing zero tolerance, amongst others. And to date, the case of overpopulation has not yet been solved. So if we on Team Proposition have provided this solution of overpopulation, or have provided a way in which the overpopulation of the earth can be greatly reduced, then definitely that is the more reason why a human should not be stopped from going into space. Your question.
Madam, could you be the first speaker on your side of the House to address my second speaker's substantive on how manned spaceflight causes tensions between nations?
Thank you very much for that question. That is why the more reason why we say it's only developed countries that can go into it. Because all these developed countries are countries that are worthy enough to take care of their problem. And also you intelligently ignore the fact when we say that the world is a global village. And whatever any country, whatever the benefits a country gets from space research, definitely will go to other worlds, will go to other other people in the world, even the third world countries, because the world is a global village. We've told you, ladies and gentlemen, the untold benefits of space research by giving up the instances of the knowledge it will bring to mankind, by saying that human beings will give better account to the environment and the solar system, by also saying that it will render people unemployed. And that is one major point which the team proposition also failed to counter. When they kept on saying that we do not care about people, they also failed to realize the fact that when we stop humans from going into space, we create a high rate of unemployment, because those who should have otherwise gone into space will no longer go into space. That certainly, ladies and gentlemen, does not hold. We've told you the benefits of allowing humans to go into space and also the consequences of not. On this note, stand firmly with us. Thank you.
Opposition speaker for her speech. We now move to the team's 4-minute considering reply speeches. The opposition team will deliver their reply speech first. There are no points for information during these reply speeches. After 3 minutes, the timekeeper will signal once like this to let the speaker know they have 1 minute left. After 4 minutes, the timekeeper will signal twice like this. To deliver the opposition's reply speech, I call upon Izzy.
Thank you. What Team Singapore has told us is that human lives is better than ideas. But I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that we discover the depletion of the ozone layer today is because of astronomy. The depletion of the ozone layer that has caused so many climatic changes today, that has endangered the life of man today, is because of astronomy. Saying that man should abandon science education and astronomy simply because some people are starving, we believe is childish. The major point of the team proposition is that it involves huge economic costs. But ladies and gentlemen, we have told you that when we consider the benefits of space exploration by man, that it is so enormous. Reason being that we should not only consider the economic cost of sending this spaceship to Earth. We told you that when we send man to space, ladies and gentlemen, it will not only add to the economy, it will provide man with the fundamental knowledge. Man without knowledge is no man, because this space exploration, sending man into space, will give us the basic knowledge of what we need to survive on Earth. They told us that instead of sending man, that we should send space rockets, things like rockets, satellites, to mention but a few. When we asked them a question, they have failed to address the major problem of unemployment, which we have raised by telling us that those in NASA that are concerned with manned spacecraft ship should decamp to other sectors. But ladies and gentlemen, they have failed to prove to us how they are sure that there are spaces in other sectors of NASA that are not dealing with manned spaceships. They told us that NASA produces irrelevant things that are irrelevant to the survival of man. But it is a sector of NASA that produces the rockets, the satellites that they are suggesting that we should send into space. And that is why we are saying that we should continue sending man into space. Because we believe that though sending things like rockets, satellites can do a great job, we believe that man can do a better job of discovering things and doing so many discoveries that will be beneficial to the survival of man. They told us that the space lab is not necessary because the cancer samples can only be taken with human life. But ladies and gentlemen, if we can get samples of disease like HIV and AIDS, we can get sample like leukemia, we can get sample of different diseases. Tell me how we can get sample of cancer, since we can make use of the laboratory. Because if you can't get sample of cancer, that means the team proposition ignores the fact that laboratories exist and that we can get sample of diseases even by taking mere blood samples. And that is why we are telling you that cancer samples are currently being taken to the space lab just to find the cure to cancer treatment. And when we abandon this project, we do not expect rockets or satellites to take care of that space lab. That means the space lab will go into extinction, which will cause a lot of destruction to mankind, because it has helped man to do so many discoveries. We told you the enormous benefits by telling you that it gives us the fundamental knowledge of who we are, of why man exists on earth. We told you that it will render so many persons unemployed if we don't fund it, which the team of proposition has considered by dodging that question. Ladies and gentlemen, let us consider the situation of people in different parts of the world. We are not saying that government should leave their basic priorities, like feeding the people, to fund space exploration. But what we are saying is that we should continue sending man to space. Governments that have the financial capacity should continue funding this, because it is essential for the survival of man. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to vote for life, if you want to vote for knowledge, if you want to vote for advancement in technology and science, join team opposition. But if you want to promote food, if you want to promote nutrition, then join team proposition. Thank you.
And now to conclude the case for the proposition and the debate as a whole, I call upon Ben.
Unlike my second speaker, Ashish, I'm not very much of a geek. When he tells me about Star Trek, when he tells me about what happens in interstellar bodies, I don't really understand what he's talking about. But there's one thing I firmly care about, and that's life. That's protecting people wherever we can, whenever we can. And I know that if we stop sending people to space today, we can save lives, and that's been the line we've stood for all the way on side proposition. We're going to show why this is true through two questions. First of all, which side really promotes the world today? And second, which side safeguards the space project, a sphere of the debate which was neglected significantly by side opposition. So let's talk first about promoting society today. And opposition did come up with some rather noble idealizations about what the world is. They talked about how the true essence of life is discovered, supposedly, through manned space exploration. They talked about how it supposedly brings us economic benefits to a massive scale, even larger than the huge stimulus packages which governments have put in place. But we demonstrated throughout the debate that most of the discoveries they talked about didn't need to come from manned space exploration. Never in the debate were we against space research, were we against astronomy, or were we against space exploration in general. So we don't think that accusation was ever true. All we suggested was that manned space exploration wasn't necessary. We were able to show by the end of the debate that manned space exploration was not worthy of the costs that were placed upon it. That's why, indeed, at the end, in their opposition reply, they conceded that discoveries like the depletion of the ozone layer came about by, I quote, astronomy rather than manned space exploration, demonstrating how far their case really strayed from its roots. Then they came up to talk about aspirations because they realized they couldn't talk about realities. They talked about how we inspire people to study astrophysics if we had manned space exploration. But we constantly challenged them on this issue to question why is it that we need to send such missions up for such inspiration to occur. All they did was to repeat this in various permutations. They talked about how we stop children from becoming astronauts. They talked finally at the end about how we stop knowledge from being powered. But the fact was, we didn't want to stop this research. All we wanted to stop was a wasteful project that wasn't saving lives where we could. And then they tried to spin a final angle by talking about overpopulation. But when we showed that alternatives existed on Earth, which were simpler, their only response was to retreat and talk about a smaller context of climate change. But they never fundamentally grappled with why manned space exploration was necessary, and that was the basic point we raised from the beginning of the debate, that there's a finite amount of money we've got to make sacrifices, especially since the developed world is struggling today. We also talked about how it compromises international relations between nations because of the way space exploration has been politicized. All these arguments were sustained, we didn't see an attack of them. So let's now talk about the second issue of safeguarding space projects. And here it's unfortunate that we raised a significant amount of analysis from the beginning about how money is better spent on satellites that directly help people on Earth, but how telecommunications and financial information really bring stability to the global village, analysis brought about by my third speaker. All we saw was a singular attack throughout the debate from side opposition about how unemployment occurs as a result of National Space Agency supposedly laying off all these people. We responded to this by talking about how there were alternatives. We responded to this by talking about how scientific professionals were really attractive to the rest of the world, and we talked about space debris and how that's really dangerous, but they didn't respond to it. All they chose to do was repeat this analysis throughout the debate, and that's why we say on the issue of safeguarding the space project as well, it was side proposition that took the debate. So because we cared about people and we cared about space, we truly care. Vote with us.
This is a way to keep myself in check. Okay, so we thought this was quite an interesting debate. I love space personally. It's just a personal interest of mine, the debating nerd in me anyway. But aside from that, I think it is a legitimately interesting debate. Whether or not we should be allocating mass of our resources to be trying to push forward, to push men into space for some specific purpose and reason, or should we just decide that we are an earthbound species, and that be that, and let's get on with it, and try and do what we can with what we have done here. So we saw two vastly different lines being put forward in this debate, as one would hope, and I don't want to give a result right away, so I'm going to I'll keep you in suspense for a little bit and deal with what we thought happened in this debate. So basically, when deciding this debate, we thought that one side of today's debate went into a lot more depth when they were explaining their arguments. They really tried to go that level down and grasp at those core reasons, which is why we should buy the arguments that they were giving us, why that their logic would really hold true in all situations. The second thing that one side did a lot more than the other is that we saw that they managed to keep their matter relevant to the topic. And this is something which I really put out as a warning flag to all debates out there, is that you need to be always showing me why it is that what you're saying is important to the debate, specifically your side of the debate, or else really it doesn't have that much purpose. So I need to be knowing why you're saying, when you're saying it, and hopefully you'll be able to tell me is to win the debate, and this is why it's relevant. The other thing that we would just like to say is there was also a bit of a lack of responsiveness from one side. Is that we didn't really see them dealing with all the matter that had been brought up in a way that we thought would have been more appropriate. We would have liked it if they had really gone into some depth and tried to challenge and clash on all the issues. That said, we did really enjoy the manner of this debate. We thought it was a really polite, a nice debate, which is something which you always want to see in the gentlemanly realm and gentle lady realm of debating. I don't want to be called out on anything there, which is really something very nice. We would also just like to say that POI use is something that you guys should try and do to the maximum visibility. It's a wonderful part of debating, to be able to not just submit essays from both sides, but actually be able to interact with one another, get responses, get people to say things about what you have to say. So anyway, I'd really encourage both sides to come to us for individual feedback. I think it's the end of the day. We can walk back, have a chat, whatever it is. So unanimously, we gave this debate to Singapore. This debate was style on both sides, and I really must commend both sides on your style. I was really impressed with it. Yeah, I like it. Best of luck.